You think modern guns are the deadliest weapons ever made? Think again. Imagine standing on a battlefield where there is no warning shot, no loud bang, just a silent blur flying towards you at the speed of death. In the Middle Ages, some weapons were so brutal, so efficient, that even trained soldiers feared them more than bullets. And the scariest part? They didn't need gunpowder. Take the English longbow used in the wars between England and France, especially during the legendary battles of the Battle of Agincourt and the Battle of Crécy. These bows weren't simple sticks. In the hands of a trained archer, they could fire up to 10 arrows a minute. 10. Each arrow could pierce armor at over 200 meters. Now imagine thousands of archers releasing at once. The sky would turn black. Knights in shining armor, the tanks of their time, fell in seconds. No reload delay, no smoke, just wave after wave of razor-sharp death. And here's the twist. Archers trained from childhood, their skeletons were deformed from the power required to draw those bows. This wasn't just a weapon. It was a lifetime commitment to killing efficiency. But what if I told you that wasn't even the most terrifying weapon? Meet the crossbow, smaller, easier to use, deadlier in the right moment. Unlike the longbow, you didn't need years of training. A farmer could become lethal in weeks, and when metal-tipped bolts slammed into armor at close range, they shattered bone. The church even tried to ban crossbows because they were considered too cruel for Christian warfare. Too cruel. Let that sink in. Now ask yourself, what kind of weapon is so horrifying that medieval leaders said it was inhumane? But we're not done, because there was something even more savage. The poleaxe. A night killer designed specifically to crush armor, hook shields, and rip riders off horses. It wasn't about distance. It was personal, brutal. One swing could cave in a helmet. Another could drag a man to the mud where mercy didn't exist. Battles weren't clean firefights. They were suffocating chaos, steel grinding against steel, men drowning in armor. And then came early gunpowder weapons, crude cannons and hand cannons. But here's the irony. For a long time, traditional medieval weapons were more reliable and more deadly than early guns. Early firearms were slow, inaccurate, and sometimes exploded in the shooter's hands. Meanwhile, a skilled archer could fire 6 arrows before a gunner reloaded once. So when people say modern guns changed everything overnight, that's not the full story. For centuries, medieval weapons dominated because they were faster, quieter, and in many situations more efficient at mass destruction. And here's the final reveal that most people never think about. Medieval warfare wasn't just about technology. It was about human endurance, strength, training, discipline. A modern gun can make almost anyone dangerous in minutes. But medieval weapons turned entire societies into weapons. Boys grew up pulling 100-pound bows. Blacksmiths forged armor knowing it might fail. Knights trained for decades knowing one arrow could end it all. So were medieval weapons truly deadlier than modern guns? In raw destructive power, maybe not. But in the context of their time, against the armor, tactics, and training of that world, they were devastating beyond imagination. They shaped nations, ended dynasties, and filled battlefields with silence long before the sound of gunfire ever existed. And the most chilling part, if you were dropped into that world with no training, no armor, no skill, you wouldn't survive 5 minutes, but the horror doesn't stop with bows and axes. Imagine a battlefield where the most feared weapon isn't even meant to hit humans directly. The trebuchet, a medieval giant that could hurl 300-pound stones over walls like toys. Cities shook, wooden houses splintered, siege towers crumbled, and sometimes the payload wasn't just stone, diseased carcasses, Dead bodies, even human waste, were flung over walls to spread terror and plague. The psychological damage? Insane. Defenders would fight not just for their lives, but to avoid the sickness raining down from above. Now, here's a question. Which is deadlier, the weapon that kills instantly, or the one that slowly destroys hope, morale, and health? But wait, there's more. The Morning Star, a club with spikes so cruel it could pierce armor, crush bones, and leave trails of blood across the battlefield. Swing it once, and even the strongest knight would stumble. And unlike guns, which rely on ammunition, a knight with a Morning Star could keep swinging until he dropped. And often he wouldn't drop until someone else did. And here's a twist you won't see coming. Some of the most feared weapons were everyday tools turned into killing machines. Farming sickles sharpened into slashing blades. Hammers used to crush stone, now smashing skulls. The ingenuity of human cruelty at its finest. And yet, amidst all this carnage, there were techniques, strategies, and training that made ordinary people into deadly warriors. A peasant, armed with nothing but a polearm, could stand against armored knights if he knew how to use terrain, leverage, and numbers. Medieval battles were not just fights. They were brutal lessons in physics, psychology, and patience. And here's the ultimate reveal, the deadliest weapon of all, human fear itself. Every arrow, bolt, or swinging axe wasn't just killing bodies. It was breaking spirits. Armies surrendered before the first blood spilled because the legends of these weapons had already done their work. So next time someone tells you that NS are the ultimate killers, remember the medieval world. A single trained archer, a crossbowman, or a team operating a trebuchet could devastate more lives than some modern weapons ever could. And if you think this sounds exaggerated, imagine stepping onto that battlefield yourself. No armor, no training, no warning. Would you last 5 minutes? 10? Most didn't even last 1. That's the terrifying legacy of medieval weapons. Silent, personal, relentless, and sometimes deadlier than anything we carry today. You've heard about the longbows, the crossbows, the crushing maces, the city-shattering trebuchets. But now comes the part nobody talks about, the moment after the battle, because medieval weapons didn't just kill you, they erased you slowly. Imagine surviving an arrow to the leg. No antibiotics, no sterile surgery. Infection would creep in. Fever would rise. Limbs were amputated with heated blades and no anesthesia. Many soldiers didn't die on the field. They died days later, screaming in tents that smelled of blood and smoke. So here's the real question. Is the deadliest weapon the one that kills instantly, or the one that guarantees suffering? And then there's something even darker. Medieval weapons were designed to defeat armor, not just flesh. The warhammer could punch through steel helmets. The halberd could hook a knight off his horse and drag him into mud where he would suffocate under his own weight. You didn't need a bullet to end a life. You needed leverage, gravity, momentum. Physics was the silent killer. And unlike modern guns, these weapons forced you to look into your enemy's eyes. You heard his breathing. You saw the fear. War wasn't distant. It was personal. That changes a man forever. Now, here's the twist nobody expects. Medieval battles often had higher casualty rates in close combat than early gun battles. Early firearms were terrifying, yes, loud, smoky, dramatic, but they were slow. In the time it took to reload, a trained fighter with a blade could close the distance and finish the fight. Technology didn't instantly replace skill. Skill ruled for centuries. And here's the final payoff. The reason medieval weapons could feel deadlier than modern guns wasn't just about body counts. It was about total impact. They controlled psychology, training, culture, even childhood. Entire societies were built around mastering these tools of destruction. Your survival depended on your strength, your endurance, your ability to fight hand to hand. Today, a weapon can make almost anyone dangerous. Back then, you had to become the weapon. Your body was trained, your muscles hardened, your mind conditioned for chaos. So if you were dropped into that world right now, no armor, no training, no battlefield awareness, you wouldn't be facing just a sword or a bow. You'd be facing generations of discipline, brutality, and survival instinct. And that's the chilling truth. Medieval weapons weren't necessarily more powerful than modern guns and raw firepower. But in their time, in their world, they were absolute, relentless, inescapable. They didn't just change wars. They shaped humanity, and maybe the scariest part of all, the same creativity that built those weapons still exists today. You've seen the blood, the steel, the broken armor. But now comes the part that changes everything, because the most terrifying medieval weapon wasn't made of wood or iron. It was strategy. Imagine standing in a tight formation, shields locked, spears pointed forward. You can't run. You can't turn. If one man breaks, everyone dies. Medieval commanders understood something brutal. Weapons are only as deadly as the minds controlling them. A wall of pikes could stop charging knights cold. A disciplined infantry line could turn heavily armed, arid nobles into trapped targets. And once panic started, it spread faster than any bullet ever could. Here's the twist. Many medieval deaths happened during the retreat. When one side broke formation, chaos exploded. Soldiers were chased down, cut from behind, trampled into mud. Thousands could die in minutes, not because of superior firepower, but because fear shattered discipline. And unlike modern warfare with communication tech and evacuation systems, there was no rescue. If your line collapsed, you were abandoned. Now think about sieges, weeks, sometimes months, starvation used as a weapon, wells poisoned, supply lines cut, entire cities forced to eat rats and leather. By the time gates opened, people were too weak to fight. No gunshot needed. Hunger had already done the job. So what was deadlier? The arrow, or the empty stomach, the blade, or the waiting? And here's the final realization that hits hardest. Medieval weapons demanded proximity. You couldn't hide miles away. You smelled the battlefield. Sweat, blood, smoke. You felt bones break through your hands. War carved itself into memory. Trauma wasn't a statistic. It was a face you remembered forever. That intensity made every weapon feel more lethal, more personal, more final. So were medieval weapons truly deadlier than modern guns? In raw explosive power, no. Modern firearms are unmatched. But in psychological terror, in physical suffering, in societal impact, medieval weapons were devastating beyond imagination. They turned villages into armies. They forced boys into warriors. They made survival depend on muscle, nerve, and willpower. And here's the last question I'll leave you with. If you had to choose, a distant battlefield with gunfire echoing far away, or standing shield to shield as arrows darken the sky above you, which one would you survive? Because in the medieval world, survival wasn't about technology. It was about whether you could endure the moment steel met bone. And most people couldn't.